Far away, deep in the Montana wilderness, stood a little wooden cabin. It was small but strong, with smoke curling gently from its chimney and snow piling up softly on its roof. The tall pine trees around it seemed to guard it, their branches swaying in the cold wind like gentle arms. This cabin was home to the Hargrove family, Tom, Grace, and their little daughter Ellie, and most of all, to their golden retriever, Ranger. Ranger was not just a dog. He was a friend, a guardian, and a silent hero. His golden fur shone even on the dullest days, and his eyes held a quiet kindness that made everyone feel safe. Every morning, Ranger would wake up early, his nose twitching with the fresh smell of pine and snow. He'd stretch and trot outside, eager to start the day beside his family. Ellie loved Ranger more than anything. She would run through the snow, laughing, her red cheeks glowing from the cold. And Ranger was always right behind her, his tail wagging, ready to catch her if she stumbled, or warm her when she sat down to rest. One day, as the sun peeked weakly through gray clouds, Tom and Grace packed their truck. The family was heading into town to buy food and supplies. It was a short trip, or so they thought. Ranger watched from the porch, his head tilted as if he understood something they did not. Ellie knelt beside him, wrapping her small hands around his warm neck. "Be good, Ranger," she whispered. He licked her cheek softly, as if promising, "I will." The truck rumbled down the icy road and disappeared among the trees. Ranger stayed on the porch, eyes fixed on the path they took, his body still and tense. The snow started to fall lightly, dusting his golden coat with white. It was quiet, too quiet. Hours passed. The sky turned darker. Ranger didn't move from his spot. The wind howled softly, but he didn't bark or whine. He was waiting for the family to come back. When night came, the cabin grew cold. Ranger lay close to the front door, his ears twitching at every sound. Outside, the snow thickened, covering everything in a soft blanket. Ranger's breath came out in little clouds. He didn't want to leave. He needed to stay where they would return, but the days that followed were heavy with silence. No footsteps in the snow, no truck lights down the road, just the endless white stretching far and wide. Inside the cabin, Ranger sniffed the air, hoping for a familiar scent. He wandered from room to room, pawing at Ellie's toys, nudging the empty chair where Tom used to sit. At night, he curled up by the fireplace, the warmth fading as the fire died. Hunger and cold pressed against him, but his heart held steady. Ranger didn't understand why his family hadn't come home. Was the road blocked? Were they lost? Or worse, had something happened to them? But the one thing he knew was this: he had to wait. No matter how long it took, no matter how hard the snowstorm blew, or how cold the nights grew, Ranger would wait. Because love is patient. Because loyalty means never giving up on those you care for. And so, day after day, Ranger sat on the porch. He watched the sky. He listened to the wind. He dreamed of the moment the truck would come back around the bend, and he would run to them, tail wagging, ready to protect and welcome them home. This was no ordinary dog. This was Ranger A, guardian of hope, a symbol of courage, in the heart of a family whose love was strong enough to brave even the loneliest winter. The snow kept falling. Day after day, it covered the world in thick white blankets, softening every sound and making the forest feel endless and empty. The roads disappeared beneath the icy sheets. The trees bent under the weight of frozen branches, and in the middle of it all, Ranger stayed. He was alone. The family had left weeks ago, and still they hadn't returned. But Ranger didn't give up. His heart was tied to that little cabin and the people inside, the people who had loved him like no one else ever had. At first, Ranger tried to find food like he always did when hunting with Tom. He sniffed the frozen earth and the trees, searching for any sign of a rabbit or a mouse. Sometimes he found scraps of jerky that Tom had stored in the woodshed, hidden away to last through the long winter. Ranger would chew slowly, his eyes never leaving the road. The cold was biting. His paws cracked on the ice, and the wind cut through his thick fur. Some nights he shivered so hard his whole body trembled, but he never left the porch. He knew. He had to stay. Each morning, Ranger would push through the snow with his nose low to the ground, trying to catch any scent of his family's return. His heart jumped whenever he heard a distant sound, a crack in the ice, the crunch of tires, a voice calling. But each time, it was only the wind or the trees creaking in the storm. His golden coat was no longer shiny. It was muddy and matted with snow. His ribs showed beneath his fur, and his once lively eyes looked tired but full of hope. Every breath he took was slow, measured, careful, because Ranger knew his family needed him to be strong. One afternoon, as gray clouds spilled over the sky, a group of rescuers arrived. They had been searching the mountain roads, looking for any sign of the Hargrove family after the avalanche that blocked the main highway. They followed Ranger's tracks to the cabin and found him waiting by the porch, a lonely figure in the snow. "Hey, boy," one rescuer said gently, reaching out with a warm hand. Ranger looked up, his tail wagging faintly but his body tense. The man tried to offer food and blankets, hoping to bring comfort. "You're safe now. Let's get you somewhere warm." But Ranger refused. He stood up and took a step back, then another, until he was staring down the snowy road. Twitched at every sound ahead. The rescuers watched quietly. They understood. Ranger wasn't leaving this place. Not without the family who had promised to come home. They tried to coax him with soft voices and kind eyes. They sat with him for hours, but Ranger never budged from the porch. He stayed watching the road, waiting for the truck, the laughter, the footsteps. That night, under a sky full of cold stars, Ranger lay on the snow-covered porch, curled into a ball to keep warm. He listened to the wind and remembered Ellie's bright smile, Tom's strong hands, and Grace's gentle voice. The cabin was quiet, but inside Ranger's heart, a fire burned, a fire of love, hope, and loyalty. No matter how hungry he was, no matter how cold or scared, Ranger would wait, because waiting was a promise. Because Ranger was a hero, a silent guardian standing firm against the storm and the world around him. White and empty as it was, could not break the bond he held. So tightly, too, weeks slipped by like slow-moving clouds. The snow covered everything in thick silence, and the cold seemed to seep into the bones of the forest. But still, Ranger waited. The golden retriever, once lively and strong, was now thinner, his fur tangled with frost and dirt. His eyes, though tired, held a steady flame of hope that refused to die. Each morning Ranger woke before dawn. He shook off the frozen snow from his coat and padded quietly to the edge of the porch. He looked down the road, eyes searching for any sign of the family's return. Every sound, the cracking of ice, the whisper of the wind, even the distant howl of a coyote made his ears twitch. Could this be them? But no, it was never the sound he longed for. Carla, a forest ranger who had heard about Ranger's story, began visiting him. She came with soft footsteps, bringing food, water, and blankets. "You're a brave dog," she whispered one afternoon, sitting beside him in the snow. Ranger pressed his head against her hand, grateful for the warmth and kindness. But when Carla tried to call him inside the ranger's cabin, gently moved away and trotted back to the porch, he would not leave his post. Carla's voice broke through the cold silence. "They might never come back," she said quietly, but Ranger's eyes never left the road. Hope lived inside him like a quiet song, growing stronger with each passing day, night after night. Ranger curled up near the door, his breath forming, soft clouds in the icy air. He dreamed of Ellie's laughter, the feel of Tom's hand on his head, and Grace's soothing voice telling him everything would be all right. Though the world outside was frozen and still, his heart beat fiercely with love. One foggy morning, just when the cold seemed unbearable, Ranger heard something, a low rumble, distant but growing louder. His ears perked, his whole body alert and trembling. His tail, stiff for weeks, began to wag slowly. The sound came closer. Wheels on ice, tires crunching over frozen dirt. And then voices the family. The truck appeared, battered and covered. With scratches, its windshield cracked from the avalanche that had trapped them on a back road for days. Tom opened the door, his face pale but alive, and called out in a voice thick with tears, "Ranger!" Ranger leapt down the porch steps, barking joyfully. His legs carried him faster than they had in weeks, bounding through the snow to the truck. Ellie climbed out, her small arms open wide. Ranger threw himself at her, licking her face with wild happiness. Ellie laughed through tears, hugging him tightly. Grace stood at the truck door, her eyes shining. "He waited for us. All this time," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ranger's body was frail, but his spirit was strong. He wagged his tail gently, his whole being glowing with relief and love. They were home. He was not alone anymore. That moment, frozen in time, told a story of courage and loyalty. A story that even the harshest storms could not break. Ranger had held on to hope when the world had seemed hopeless. He had guarded his family, even when they were gone, 'cause love never leaves. And as the family wrapped him in warm blankets and carried him inside, the storm outside seemed to soften. The snow stopped falling. The wind quieted, because inside the little cabin, a miracle had come home. Asterisk, the cabin had changed. Where once snow had piled high and cold winds had howled, now there was warmth. Slowly, the Hargrove family was healing their bodies and their hearts, and so was Ranger. The days grew brighter as spring crept back into the mountains. Snow melted, turning into sparkling streams that sang through the forest. Birds returned to the trees, and the air smelled fresh and alive. But through all the change, one thing stayed the same. Ranger's watchful eyes never left the front porch. He had survived the hardest winter of his life. His fur had grown thick again, and his golden coat shone beneath the sun. But Ranger was different now. He carried the quiet strength of someone who had faced the darkest days and waited. With a heart full of love and faith, the family worked together to repair the cabin. Tom chopped wood, Grace tended to the garden, and Ellie filled the rooms with laughter again. Ranger was always close by, walking at their sides like a silent protector. Every night, he curled up near the front door, just as he had before. Guarding their home with unwavering loyalty, visitors from nearby towns had heard about Ranger's story, the dog who waited in the snow for weeks, refusing rescue until his family returned. They brought him blankets and treats, and some even built him a small wooden doghouse, shaped like a tiny cabin. But Ranger didn't need those things. His heart was full because his family was home. He didn't need to leave his post. He wanted to stay. Ellie, now a little older, would sit beside him for hours, telling Ranger stories about school, about friends, and about the adventures they would have together. Ranger listened, his eyes soft and kind, understanding every word. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ranger lay on the porch, feeling the warmth of the fading day. He was tired now, older and slower, but his spirit was peaceful. He closed his eyes, surrounded by the family he had waited for. Tom stroked his head gently. Grace whispered, "Thank you, Ranger. You are our hero." Ellie leaned down and hugged him tightly. "I love you, Ranger," she said softly. And in that moment, Ranger knew he had done everything a dog could do. He had been brave. He had been loyal. He had loved without limits. When Ranger passed quietly one autumn day, it was as if the forest itself mourned. The golden leaves seemed to fall a little slower. The winds whispered a little softer. But the family's love never faded. On the porch where Ranger had waited for so long, they placed a small wooden sign. Here waited a hero. Ranger, the dog who never gave up. That sign became a symbol in the community, a reminder that true loyalty is patient, courageous, and full of hope. Ranger's story was told again and again by firesides, in classrooms, and on cold winter nights, inspiring all who heard it, because Ranger showed the world that love is more powerful than any storm, that sometimes waiting is the bravest thing you can do, and that the bond between a dog and his family is something no distance, cold, and no fear can ever break. Moral: loyalty is a quiet strength that waits through the darkest storms, and in love, there is always hope.